Sun come up, moon go down, world spin round and round. Time for another lesson, grasshopper. And here this man will tell you about the history of the Temple Mount.
Where the Vatican now stands, there was once a pagan temple which celebrated the mysteries of a dying and resurrecting God-man who wasn't Jesus.
Mithra.
There are many churches in Rome, I've been to a few, where you go above into the church and there's Jesus, and you go underneath and there's a little sanctuary of Mithra, and it's basically the same thing. Across the ancient world, there was this form of experiential and philosophical spirituality in these mystery cults or mystery schools. And at the center of these schools, you would find a mythos, which was an initiatory myth, a symbolic myth, which would help people who were going through the initiatory process come to this spiritual awakening, this knowledge, this what they call gnosis. And what you see in these myths is the elements that will later become the Jesus story.
But indeed, Gnosticism has been known as being, it's just a terrible, bad thing. And why? Well, it says things against Christ and stuff. Well, check out what does it actually mean? Well, gnosis means knowledge of spiritual mysteries. What? Yeah, the Gnostics, they had knowledge of spiritual mysteries, and they tried to kill them, and you hate them right now. See, they told you to hate them, just like they told you to hate the devil and all the things that go along with it. So now you think Gnostics are something bad, and all they do is have spiritual knowledge. Jesus was a Gnostic. All the prophets you ever heard about, Solomon and all these guys in Ezekiel and everybody in the Bible were Gnostics. Indeed, Webster's dictionary, the old one, says, definition of gnosis, esoteric knowledge of spiritual truth held by the ancient Gnostics to be essential to salvation. Well, why is it everybody says any of these Gnostic writings, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and Nag Hammadi texts, are all bad? They're Gnostic, and Gnostic is bad. That's because the church is trying to tell you something that, it goes against what we've been trying to teach. Well, yeah, and these people hid it for a reason. So we look into it and we find out strange things. Strange things like, well, they say that once you get to a certain level, the things that you learn, like in Masonry and all these other, Gnostic hidden cults that everybody talks about now as being all bad, that what you actually learn is that it's all about the seasons and night and day and star worship and tree worship and animal worship and child sacrifice and human sacrifice and cannibalism. And let's look into this. Let's verify this truth. Like when you see symbols like this and they say, oh, well, that's Masonry, and you're like, well, it doesn't start with a G, it starts with an M, and they go, oh, well, it's God, just to cover it up. But what there really stands for is gnosis, because they know what the hell has been going on with these goofy motherfuckers with this doomsday cult stuff that goes on. But I digress. So you look for a Gnostic to try to tell you something, and you're listening to one right now. Let me show you something. Let me tell you a little story about a man named Jed, who during a time of drought could barely keep his family fed, and then he started to eat them while living in the desert. And that most, if not all, of these old sanctuaries have a good representation, something like this mosaic that's in a temple near Alexandria that was buried up under years and years of sediment that they found by accident and cleared off, and are able to take pictures of it like this to re-enlighten humanity on esoteric things that they used to use in religion. And how these people would talk about how in the springtime there's a lot of rabbits that are born, in the rainy season, and it goes through time, and all these little stories and allegories, and they tell you that it's in the heavens and how they twist throughout the years. And people are like, what? Well, it's the astronomy and the astrology knowledge of the ancient Babylonians that goes back thousands and thousands of years. I mean, even in the Bible, they talk about the Chaldeans, which is where Abraham comes from, that had star charts going back 225,000 years. So what does this have to do with everything? Well, this was part of the ancient mysteries, and when people would have these gods that were reborn, they would show them this calendar and give them a hint to the way things were. And you could be indoctrinated in, and then you would learn these mysteries. And so for gnosis, we look back at the ancient Greeks, and they're the ones that came up with the name, apparently, or the word that we use now. They used a lot of the words that we use now, then Latin and everything, and tried to pull it all together for everybody, for a language that would make the words make sense, where actually the sun now becomes the sun of light and the sun of your children, and all these things end up equating out to where it all works out right, and then people get into a big fog for over 2,000 years. But I digress. Let's look at these gods, like, say, Zeus. Zeus is a storm god, and he's depicted as being very much in power. Everybody knows he was like king of the gods of the Olympians during this epoch in time, during the era, not in the golden age. The golden age was when they had the gods before them, which were Kronos and, the guy that ate his kids. And of course, Zeus came out of that and was the next age of man. And each of these ages are whenever the zodiac goes through a major precession. So whenever you have a zodiac, it goes around each year, but it's backing up just a little bit, almost like a wagon wheel turning over time. When you're watching it from a distance, it looks like it's going backwards. When it goes forwards, it's an optical illusion. These people knew that. That's the reason calendars are quite often depicted on wagon wheels. And you can see that depiction all through Rome. In fact, even to this day, where the depiction is still there, but not shown as being as evident. Where one may not have realized when it was built, that actually this place here, which is Vatican Square, has this same symbology. If you'll look, there is the wagon wheel that's in the center of time, and it's run in a circle around of all the gods that they had, and you see that around the perimeter, right? And that through time, and the wheel goes round and round. Okay, are you seeing this in the calendar effect? And how do you see the center spire that they stole from Egypt? These ancient monoliths to Asherah are put in the center here. And what does that make out of this thing? This actually makes a clock, people. This is a sundial. And right now we're at about, would you say about 11:45? Coming up on noon, huh? Yeah, and this thing that looks like a great phallic symbol too. So it's all there. All the pagan worship's just rippled around into it. Let's look deeper into this, though. Let's look at these Greek gods real quick. So Zeus, let's look at this guy here. This is eerie for me right now too, because this is that same picture that I turned around. If you'll look in my other files, there's one where Zeus is an alien. And if you take this and flip it upside down, that dent crease in his forehead becomes the mouth of an alien. The two eyes are still the eyes. The nose becomes a bone ridge down his head. And it looks weirdly like some kind of reptilian alien upside down. It's freaky. And it was an accident with the word pad actually being upside down that I was looking on at the time with the picture and trying to flip it over, and it didn't flip. And I'm like, Anyhow, the whole story's on there. But let's look into Zeus here, thunder god, the god of thunder. So I'm going to tell you now that the reason that Zeus was heralded as being the biggest god during this time is because we were coming out of the last ice age, right? And this came about shortly after that. It seems like, humanity just did this big jump. And if you look back behind even this, it goes back to ancient Sumeria, where they all have this same tale of these storm gods and different things that go on. And in the Sumerian tale, the storm god gets killed. And doesn't that screw up humanity for the rest of time, regardless of any of these other people's tales? But let's look at Zeus. Zeus is a storm god. He carries lightning and thunder, and he can make it rain or not rain. If he gets pissed off, he can, make it flood. He's kind of an omnipotent god a little bit. Whenever you look at all the stories of him in Clash of the Titans, he can, blow wind and do all kinds of things. But if you think about it, he's really a storm god. And so is Yahweh of the Bible. He's a storm god, shows up at Mount Sinai as a dark cloud, which instantly made me think of Satan. But he's a dark cloud that has lightning bolts coming out of him and stuff. And if you look at the actual words in the Bible, when Moses speaks to him, Moses speaks to God with thunder. So they're actually worshiping, hopefully it'll rain, in this super desert dry area that they're wandering around in, trying to find a god for 40 years, they say. So let's look at it just a little bit closer, and what you find is, yeah, it does seem like that. You find out that the real story of the Red Sea was the story of Yam Suf, which actually, and that's the Hebrew words, and that's actually the Reed Sea, and that somebody screwed it up a long time ago, and that he never parted the Red Sea like me and my brother and sister grew up watching with Cecil B. DeMille and the whole parting thing where they went across. And of course I looked into this, and there's a 160-foot drop off of spikes and stuff, and there's no way to get people down that. You can't get professional mountain climbers to rappel down it, even if you could open it up to where people could walk across it. But I digress again. So he's a storm god, and this can make him all powerful too, people. I tell you how a storm god could become all powerful is that people would see that seeds, until it rains on them, wouldn't grow. That it took water, it took it raining, and so apparently that cloud god that was over there, and see this cloud god, clouds are over you all the time. They're always watching, and they're there night and day, and storms can come at any time. He knows when you've been sleeping. He knows when you've been bad or good. It's the Santa Claus of storm gods here. He's able to manipulate things, but generally always in a storm way. He can part those Red Sea. He can cause big storms to happen. He can calm waters. He can, and all these things are references to storms. I mean, you do get this. That somehow this, lightning and vengeance and things like that are all correlated with this, that, he has lightning bolts. Yahweh is seen as looking exactly like this. Well, this looks just like Baal Hadad, and that's the Canaanite god. And we'll get there real quick, but the storm gods, they can do bad things, right? But also it's the bringer of rain, and rain makes all the plants grow, and it fills up the rivers, and it moves the ocean, and it makes the world go around to these people. And therefore, and in a time of drought, you see, because it used to be an ice age, and during the ice age, the world became a lot skinnier and cramped in, where ice enclosed to where you didn't have much area. And right there, it was the very fertile plain that all this sprouted out of. And once it receded back, there was a golden age of prosperity, and then the drought through the desert area happened. And when this happened, apparently the white people went north, and the black people went, or they already stayed down in Africa, and so on. But at this time of drought, the best thing that was needed, the most thing that was needed, was rain, and the bringer of life that was, somehow in control of it, and we needed to worship or do something to make this happen. It could even become a real common motif if you saw all these storms happening, that you could envision something like the forces of God, and how in Revelation horses are coming through the clouds. Everything's on a cloud. God rides on a cloud, that he causes storms upon the waters, that he could cause a great flood, that he in his omnipotence now, you see, could be the one that does or doesn't calm the waters, that if you're in the ocean and a big storm happens in your primitive boat, that you pray to God that the storm goes away, so you're praying to that storm god. That if you're in the drought area, you need rain, and you're praying to that storm god. And so now it all starts to equate that the storm god becomes real powerful during a time of drought and need. Because you know, storm gods, they all of a sudden seem like they have a lot of power, don't they? Storm god could cause ships to go down. Storm gods can cause good things or bad to happen. You know, yin and yang is all built into one. It's not yin and yang anymore, but it's all built into one. You can see how you can get a solo god worship starting to blend out of just picking the right deity at the wrong time and attempting to take it out. But one final factor here on storm god equation to Yahweh is, I guess the storm god could do all these things, but then if you saw something at the end of a storm like, oh, a rainbow, then you would equate those to the promises that the calming of the sea was from him, and that he maybe not flood the whole planet again coming out of the last ice age, and you grasp that thought too. And so the storm god gets more and more powerful during a time of drought. But let's look into all of this. And man, when you look up storm god, there's a lot of storm gods. And God, of course, God talking about how he'll calm the storms and all these things going on, where there's definitely an equation that goes on there. And you see Baal, the storm god of ancient Mesopotamia. They keep showing this creature over and over again that they're talking to. I don't know if you can actually even see that real good over there. Here's Baal. But inside of these gods, you see things like, oh, there's Raiden. He's the storm god of the Japanese. Raiden. He's the lightning god, storm god. Remember Raiden? I don't know if you ever remember Big Trouble in Little China, where they had the four winds and him show up and stuff, and he rode the lightning. You know, Metallica ride the lightning. That type of concept here, where you have the lightning going on. But as you see all these storm gods that are through here, you've got to pick out some like this guy, like Moloch over here, and say, well, that's that storm god. That's Baal, the storm god. Okay, well, that's the one that they used to apparently feed the kids to. Here's another depiction of him where he has his arms outstretched, and they make a pit in there. And if you look, there's two mountains that are here that are showing. And they say this is Baal, right? Well, the idea is that they come up peeking over two mountains. This is from the Hittites, and the Hittites learned all their things from the Sumerians, a people that were kind of apparently not as warlike as the Akkadians and the Hittites and a few other people, and they came in and just smoked and killed these guys, but they realized that they had agriculture and writing and everything else, and pretty much took a lot from them, and we basically have all our mythology from them. They had some 70 gods, and there's 70 gods listed in the Bible too. So there's all these ancient storm gods, and they have their lightning effect, and of course if they want to, they can cause a rainbow. See? When the storm has swept by, the wicked are gone, but the righteous stand firm forever. Proverbs. Storm God talks to Moses in thunder. To a people that are in drought, I can really see how that can be somebody that's a storm god. I remember not too long ago watching The Life of Pi and seeing his battle with the storm god. Remember? Yeah? And you could see something like this creeping over the landscape and thinking that that's the finger of God, or tornadoes and things. And does anybody remember Twister and the Twister movie? Whenever they talked about, they had F3s and F4s, and they were all excited, and the girl that didn't know anything said, has there ever been an F5? And everybody stops eating, and then she goes, oh, what that be like? And she looks up at the guy with the glasses, and he goes, finger of God. and everybody's just solemn for a while. Yeah, remember that? So, if we're going to grab one of these, we might as well grab the oldest one that's around, the ancient Sumerians. They're the first people that had written knowledge and tablets and anything that we can really go off of. They stretch all the way back to the civilization of Arata that they even talk about in their elder tablets as something that came from them, that they were a civilization of the architects that lived up in the mountains, up in the Cedar Mountains and stuff, where Enki had started out and then came down into the plains. Regardless of that, what we have here is Enki. Here's the god of the waters. See the water pouring out of him always. And then Anzu, the bird or eagle that's there, or perhaps a bird that used to eat the dead people that were up on daises, and they thought they would take pieces and fly up into the heaven like buzzards, get real high up, and they were taking pieces of people to heaven to God. But here's the two-faced God over here. He's facing both ways. Everybody equates it to being his chauffeur, which actually was supposed to have been a black man that was mahogany. And these were white people with blue eyes. Inanna was extremely pale compared to these. These were tanned out real well, as everybody gets in the sun, living in Mesopotamia. But she was listed as being pale and almost vampire-like with green eyes and red hair. And doesn't that sound Irish as hell to you? But here's the god of war, Orion. And that leads us through all of this story here, where whenever you have the tree of life, and this becomes a Christmas tree. This is, by the way, in the temple, and so they've taken a tree indoors during the Christmas time, an evergreen type, to keep it alive. And this is where this origin all comes from. And all the gods, the major players are there. Here is Leo, the lion. Here is Aries, the goat, right? So this is leading and ushering in through an age, and this is believed to be back at the time of Leo, coming out of that they're showing this signification. This guy down here, and it looks like he's in the pit. Remember the two pillars, the two mountains that were there? This is Shamash, the sun god, coming up over the mountains through a special gap on a certain day, signifying that this is the dying of winter. And the ceremony they used to do was Shamash would go into one of the ziggurats, stay in there for 3 days, because the sun would get to its lowest point at winter solstice that it gets. I mean, if you're up near the North Pole, it dips out to where it becomes night and so on. So it dips to its lowest point at December 21st. Then for 3 days it sits still or dies or is at rest, and then it rises again slowly up, but still there's more dark than night, dark than day, more night than day time, in our time thing like we have with our daylight savings time and everything we switch for now. But they knew of this procession so long ago, and the fact that it came all the way up to Easter. And Inanna is known as Istar or Easter. She's Venus, the morning star. Yeah. And she heralds in the fact that it comes in through summer. And then you have Orion, who comes through summer into fall. The two-faced god goes sour on you in fall and takes you in through winter, which the spring rains bring you back around. And it's their first original zodiac, not drawn in an actual circlet for you, if you will. And so Shamash was the son of An, who is not pictured here because he's in heaven. He is heaven itself, if you will. So he's the first depiction of a god and a heaven. This is it. And that he's in heaven, that he was originally the major deity, but now he's become an old man, father time, and then switched out, bringing rise to his new children. And his son, Shamash, is his reflection. And the idea is that if you took and polished a piece of brass and were to reflect the sun off of it, that it almost looks exactly the same. And they say that the sun is not Anu, but it is Shamash, the reflection of their father, and that he was sacrificed and set fire to bring warmth back to humanity after the Ice Age. And the Akkadians and a later people took these people who were supposedly the primordials of us, but if you look at their names like Enki, En is Lord, Enki is Lord of the Earth, and he gets demoted by Enlil, Lord of the Air, to being just Lord of the Waters, and turns into our Neptune character. In fact, the Greeks and Romans know well that this is the Neptune they talk about. In fact, the ocean that they talk about that he dwells in is the ocean down past Sumeria, off of Egypt, straight on down, what ends up known as the Absu and the Abyss, that he can come around to the Mediterranean and visit, but you sure don't want him to come through if he causes a hurricane, all these type of things. He can cause floods, he can do this. It'd be better if you praised him from afar. Anyhow, but he is Aquarius, by the way. Okay, so he's Aquarius. Now, interestingly, they do have females in their pantheon, but only a few of them, and the rest of them are like the mothers of the other gods. They're meant to be the mothers. By the way, these Sumerians already have a full check on things. So, Ki is the earth, okay, and this in Enki, and so he's Lord of the earth, right? But he's Lord. He's not God of the earth. They don't have a God situation. The God, these were all looked at as being gods, and that's a name that's made up later. These were the people that mastered what they did, and each one had one special thing that they helped to master in, although this guy was used quite a bit. He's known in their ancient mythos as the creator of mankind, and he took clay, and through taking a sacrificed kingu and using his blood and DNA, somehow formed men, and their version seems very like genetic manipulation, using a piece of each, putting it together, using that, putting it in an egg, and then inseminating that in their primordial Lulu man, which was the very first upgrade. They apparently took a Cro-Magnon man and tried to upgrade him, and that really wasn't working too well. So then they did this secondary thing, the super upgrade, that put a part of their self in us. This is in the Bible looked at as whenever God took a piece of rib and then formed a woman or so on. And at these festivals that the Akkadians had after this, they, of course, sacrificed a lamb as a scapegoat. And each year at the end of all this festival, which ended up being January 1st in their calendar, they would all make a thing that we would call nowadays a resolution for the coming year to better themselves in one aspect or another. And they kind of did it kind of publicly a little bit to try to better mankind and to keep bettering themselves and bettering themselves. And I tell you that the time these people were doing this, which looks like about 12,000 BC, most of the people around them were like, ugh, rub stick. In fact, I was led to believe whenever I was growing up in school that everyone at this time was ugh, rub stick. And this came about the time of the Bible, that it all came from the Bible. Everybody was all Bible stuck. Till somebody dug this up under a wall that was under ashes that was 7,000 BC. Yeah, the wall had been knocked down, and then since then, other built on top of it and stuff, so it goes past that, but they only willingly said 7,000 BC. Well, so what is this? And all these guys, and Aquarius, and the eagle, and boom, and the sun, and the cross symbol with Orion going on. What's this got to do with everything? Well, let me show you something. Well, it all happens to have something to do with the three wise men. Yep, they're often depicted as two white guys and a brown guy. Yep, two white guys and a brown guy. But if you want more on that, and perhaps why they were late. Remember, they were late, and why they were searching around and trying to find where it was, going off of a star setup. I'll show you the star setup, but if you want to know more about the three magi who came from Persia, they're from the east. So, so Persians, people who had belief in Mithra. So let's look at this. The three wise men. Okay, well, the three wise men from the east. They're from Persia. But what else is known as the three wise men that I learned of in astronomy a long time ago? Well, Orion's belt, one of the easiest things to find out of the sky whatsoever. And they say it points at the star of Sirius, which is, the northern star and the most bright star or whatever in there. So it's a star is in the east always. And okay. And so that kind of coagulates a little bit here. Orion, where it's these three kings, and the Egyptian pyramids are lined up exactly the same, so it's got something to do with it. Wow, this starts to get real deep. You know how the fact that Orion's belt seems to have a correlation with the three pyramids and all lining up with time and space, and ooh, there's going to be something neat about this. Hold on. Yeah, there is that correlation there. The three kings seem to line up at Sirius and point exactly to the point on the ground where the sun comes up on December 25th, right where it does its bounce. Whenever on the 21st it goes down, and at its lowest point it rests or dies for 3 days and then is arisen. And when it arises from the lineup right there. And there's some validity to the three kings, though. The three wise men that come from the east. There actually was and is tabulated stories. And I've got it in one of my other videos. Look up the three wise men, and it'll tell you what myrrh really is, and what the three wise men actually did while they were late, and so on again. But this is this, and this is Jesus. This is the birth of the Son. Okay, and so how does that relate? Well, Kingu in the old epic stories is looked at as being our moon before the god Sin became our moon. Each one of the gods switched down one level, like they retired and gave it to their children. And this is a primordial thing, almost like the Roman thing, where there was Kronos and everybody, and then there was Zeus. So it's this passing of the baton thing. And let me tell you about this. So the ancient Sumerians actually have a story of how we got our moon that goes along with their primordial creation myth. In their creation myth, there's two dragons, and this is how I learned about it through my Dungeons and Dragons thing, is that Tiamat and Bahamut get into a great fight and get busted up, and they end up running into Kia, which was Earth, and it spills Kia's drink all over Kia, or Tiamat's drink all over Kia. This is where we get all the extra water on the planet, and that in the process we get 1/3 of Tiamat as part of us, and the rest of it gets cast out and turns into the asteroid belt that's out there, and then the rest of it gets cast and turned into the Milky Way, right? And her bodyguard, who stood up for her, was Kingu. And even though he was a great god and a valiant warrior, he stood up for her. In the process, he got his head cut off. And in the fight that they make a description of, I got the allegory. A lot of people still looking at Sumerian stuff hasn't. But they said that that what had happened during the fight was that he stepped in front of the destroyer and he was willing to take one for the team. And whenever he did so, he got his head cut off. And that his head, in the description, falls on the ground pale, forever facing Tiamat in reverence of what had happened. And so he was always watching over her. And I got the allegory real quick. Since we're part of Tiamat and Ki thrown together, that's the moon. And indeed, they said Kingu is the man in the moon, and that he's dead. You can tell. And you can see it, can't you? The man in the moon? Yeah? And he's Kingu, and they're going to revere him for whenever they pass down from gods, the Anuna gods pass down to humanity kingship, to where they take over whenever the Anunnaki leave, that the rulers of the areas will be known as kings in his honor. And this is way before they actually have people known as kings. But isn't it strange how they've got the kings of Egypt and the kings of Africa and the kings of ancient England and kingy, it all falls suit. And how most everything that we have in Christianity and even Judaism all comes out of this, and people, fighting over semantics and whether or not they've had their Savior or not. By the way, everybody's already had their Savior. In fact, the Jews have 4 times over, and they just won't agree to it because they're a doomsday cult people. They think the world's supposed to end. They don't think mankind is supposed to ascend and get more and more knowledge and become Star Trek and take off and take over the galaxy and do the thing and become God. They actually think that due to their sins, they're supposed to be killed off. And Rome tried to oblige that. Rome tried to go ahead and give them an Armageddon. We'll get there in a second, but things like the Christmas tree that somebody takes indoors is the tree of life that they have back then. It's an evergreen type tree where, hopefully you can see this here, but they're always seeding and feeding it. They've got a bucket of water, or they're pollinating each little polyp of it and stuff. And this tree of life is either like this, like an opium poppy type thing, or it's an evergreen shoot, and it's something that grows throughout the winter. And there's a story even back then. Let's look at this real quick. Inanna and the Halupupu tree. Let's look at this. There's a story, and it usually gets thrown up under the idea of tree worship, where you actually had Inanna, this goddess here, and she was in love with somebody named Dumuzi. And this is Dumuzi here, coming out of the tree. And Dumuzi gets killed and taken into the underworld, although they just say he goes to the underworld. And he's stuck there, and she has to go and get him out. And when she goes to get him out, they ceremoniously take off her clothing and all of her fancy stuff all the way down, so she's stripped down to nothing. And then she has to fight with the underworld gods, who were basically just people living on the south of the equator, maybe Egypt and Africans, to get him back. Okay, because he's supposed to be indentured to service there. So what she does is she tricks the people by putting somebody else in his place, giving them somebody else in his stead. When the gods come to pick him up, they find that he's all living in luxury, acting like he's laughing about it, and so they snatch him up anyhow, take him down to hell. She goes back to get him, and in the process of, trying to plea for his way out, he ends up spending half of the year with her and half the year without. And whenever he's with her, it is springtime starts, and it's what brings about all the fruits and everything that happens. And that their love, these are the original Romeo and Juliet people. There's love stories in here that are as deep as that you look at Inanna and Dumuzi, and it's even in the Bible as Tammuz. Look it up. And Adonis, in fact, God is known as Adonis. In fact, when they say Yahweh, they say Adonai. They talk about Adonis, and it's this rebirthed God right here that was in love with the lady. That Inanna was the queen at the time, running things like the Queen of Sheba and stuff. But no. These Hebrews took it all out, and women are all choked down, and they put a burqa on, and they're traded and treated like slaves. And we're still under that dogma until today. We're finally climbing out of it, where women, I guess, can speak. Can they speak now? I think they can vote. You see this weird iconography of their Christmas. This is their winter solstice situation here. And you can see that he's being rebirthed out of this evergreen tree that this god is holding back. And here is the eight-pointed star that is the star of Shamash, the sun god, and how the sun god gets reborn. And this is the son of Shamash, Tamuzi. And so the son of the son of God, the Son of God, gets reborn on December 25th. So you start to put these things together later, and it gets equated into other little mythologies, almost like Rome, took a little Greek, and so they were the same, so they mended and melded. It's what people did later. Like, they couldn't come up with anything new and creative. In fact, I'm showing you now, there ain't nothing new created on the world. They even said it in the Bible, ain't nothing new and changing. Well, that was written before them by these people. Seriously, it says on their tablets, ain't nothing new. When other people are coming up with new shit, they go, ah. And they go, oh, well, my God, da, 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 da. And they go, ah, Simpsons did it right here. So, let's look at this again. A little bit more. Maybe another aspect of this. Born on December 25th, doing all these things. Later in this same area, we would call Siam and Persia. Persia and all the Arabian Night stories and all that type of stuff. Let's look at that real quick. Well, in Persia, you generally have people which, I don't know, look at all these pictures. This guy has this little Phrygian cap. I don't know if you can see this, but it's the way the little cap does with the little wump over on it. You can see a little lumpy cap, and they're in all these pictures. And the neat thing about these pictures is something that I helped figure out, is if you look, it's just weird, but even no matter where you go in all these different reliefs, his legs are all bent in the same way, and it has to do with Taurus the bull, and he's sacrificing the bull. And so I looked at it, and these people start up in Samaria, in Persia, in that area, east of Eden, if you will. No, this is the place that, believe it or not, the Sumerians had their own word, Eden, Edin, and it was the name of this area. So yeah, they had Eden, and they had a flood story that flooded the whole world, and how people got saved by Enki and everything too, way before the Bible, about twice as long back in time as you give time, if you even put in the idea of these people that they throw in there living 999 years, because this goes back like 28,000 years. If you look at their king's list, it goes back to 225,000 years ago. And it's a Stele King's List, totally marked up. I'm not going to go there. Look at one of my other things. It's got the King's List on it, and it runs back. And I believe that they were just looking at moons at that time. If we're just looking at moons, it goes to 26,800, but then we're at the year 2000, so it's 28,600 now or something like that is where it basically puts it at. I digress. Look at this leg posture. I've got this video I've already made on it. I think I'm just going to interject and show it right here, and then I'm going to show you the video of knowledge of what Mithras and this sun god thing and what he means. And oddly enough, you look at Mithras like this here, and you get a depiction of the things that went along with it, and how it had a shepherd king. It had the ancient Sumerian shepherd king who had turned into God, and how he's anointing Mithra. And there's a dove. This is a fresco that's from 300 BC, people, and he's got 12 disciples that go around him. But people back then, the sacred mystic knowledge and stuff is all about the fact that this is 12 disciples are the Zodiac, and the little trees of life that they have with them. And this is God known as Saturnus. This is Saturn, who's saying it's all okay. And by the way, this looks like John the Baptist baptizing Jesus Christ, and I'm not sure, but I'm willing to bet that this is the fresco they were looking at when they were trying to think of what to make up the Bible out of. Doesn't it?
Josephus wrote that a woman named Mary, who called her son a myth for the world, slayed him, ate him, thereby turning him into a human Passover lamb. In the Gospels, we now have the Last Supper. Jesus tells his disciples, "Take, eat, this is my body, this is my blood," thereby turning him into a human Passover lamb.
Claimed about Mithras, and I'll read you some of them.
Check
He
it.
was a saviour, Mithras, sent to earth to live as a mortal, through whom it was possible for sinners to be reborn into immortal life. He died for our sins, but came back to life the following Sunday. He was born of a virgin on December the 25th in a manger or perhaps a cave, attended by shepherds, and became known as the light of the world. He had 12 disciples with whom he shared a last meal before dying. His devotees symbolically consumed the flesh and blood of him. Because Mithras was the sun god, he was worshipped on Sundays.
Is he a tribute band?
He was often depicted with a halo around his head. And Mithraists gave each other gifts on December the 25th. The leader of the religion was called the Papa, and their HQ was on Vatican Hill in Rome.
And you're not kind of writing off the chance that this was just a massive coincidence. And then one day they all went to the Vatican and went, what?
Well, isn't that special?